The desert wind whispered through the empty streets of Eldridge Hollow, carrying the faint scent of rain that never came. It was just past midnight when 14-year-old Daniel Frost slipped out of the shadows near the old neon diner, his sneakers scuffing against the cracked asphalt. His hands trembled as he clutched a folded scrap of paper, the edges worn from being gripped too tightly. The diner's neon sign flickered like a dying heartbeat, casting erratic red glows on the row of parked motorcycles lined up outside. Harleys, mostly, their chrome frames gleaming under the sodium lamps. Daniel's eyes darted to the biggest one, a black beast with worn leather saddlebags, parked at the curb like a sentinel. He'd seen the rider earlier that evening, a grizzled man in his 40s, nursing coffee inside, his vest patched with the Iron Promise emblem, an iron fist clutching a broken chain. Daniel's heart pounded as he approached the bike, glancing over his shoulder at the shuttered windows of the community center across the street. The building, once a hub for neighborhood kids and families, now stood boarded up, its doors chained after months of redevelopment whispers that had torn everything apart. His family had been among the first to speak out, reporting the shady deals that displaced them quietly, one eviction notice at a time. But speaking out had cost them. Threats in the night, jobs lost, and now Daniel's father gone missing after a late shift at the mill. With a deep breath, Daniel wedged the note under the Harley's ignition key, the paper fluttering slightly before settling. He didn't wait to see if anyone noticed. He vanished into the alley, his small frame swallowed by the darkness, leaving behind a plea that carried the weight of unspoken fears. The note read simply, "He kept his promise. Please help us keep ours." No name, no details, just those words, in a boy's shaky handwriting, invoking a ghost from the past. Inside the diner, the door chime barely registered over the low hum of conversation. Jax Harlan, the owner of that black Harley, pushed through the booth's vinyl seat, his calloused hands wrapping around a steaming mug. He was a man carved from the same hard earth as the town, broad shoulders scarred from years on the road, a jaw set like forged steel. Jax had ridden with the Iron Promise for 2 decades, a brotherhood born from the ashes of old wars and broken oaths. But tonight his mind wandered to promises of his own, the kind that lingered like engine smoke. His brother-in-arms, Zeke Forge Malone, had died 5 years back, shielding a group of families in this very neighborhood from a corrupt land grab. Zeke's last words, gasped under the glare of emergency lights, had been a vow: "Keep watch over them. Promise me, brother." Jax had nodded then, but life had pulled him away. Routes to ride, debts to settle. The guilt gnawed at him like rust on chrome. He stepped out into the cooling air, the gravel crunching under his boots. The Harley sat undisturbed, but something caught his eye, a slip of paper tucked against the key fob. Jax unfolded it slowly, the diner light spilling over the words. His breath caught. Zeke's promise, the neighborhood. It hit him like a throttle twist, sharp and unrelenting. Who was the kid? Why now? Jax scanned the empty street, the wind tugging at his vest. No sign of anyone. He pocketed the note and straddled the bike, the engine roaring to life with a guttural thunder that echoed off the buildings. Headlights cut through the night as he gunned it toward the chapter house on the outskirts, the paper burning a hole in his pocket. By the time Jax burst through the heavy oak doors of the Iron Promise Hall, the clock ticked toward 2 a.m. The place was a fortress of weathered timber and steel beams, walls lined with photos of fallen riders, Zeke's among them, his smile fierce under a dusty helmet. A dozen brothers lounged around the central fire pit, nursing beers and swapping stories of the road. They looked up as Jax slammed the note on the scarred oak table, the flame light dancing across their tattooed arms. "Read this," Jax said, his voice low but edged with gravel. The room fell silent as Rook, the youngest patch holder, picked it up. His eyes widened, passing it around. Murmurs rippled, names of old fights. Zeke's stand against the developers who'd greased palms to raise the community center for some faceless condo empire. "That was Zeke's turf," said Lena, the chapter's medic and a widow who'd patched more than wounds. Her hands, steady from years in the field, clenched into fists. "He swore we'd protect those families, and we walked away." Jax leaned against the table, the weight of years settling on him. "Not anymore. Kid left this on my bike. He's out there scared, and so are they. We ride at dawn. All of us. Call it in. Every chapter, every rider who owes Zeke." The call went out like a signal flare. Phones buzzed across state lines, from dusty garages to rain-slicked highways. By 4 a.m., confirmations poured in, 300 strong, converging on Eldridge Hollow. Not for vengeance, but for resolve, a silent army of leather and loyalty, engines tuned to the rhythm of honor. Jack stood on the porch as the first hints of pink streaked the horizon, the note crumpled in his fist. The air smelled of dew and distant exhaust, the desert awakening to the low rumble building in the distance. Across town, in a cramped motel room, Daniel huddled under thin blankets, his mother's arm around him. They'd fled their home days ago, after the latest threats. Whispers of the redevelopment project's backers, local officials with deep pockets, had silenced complaints before. But Daniel couldn't shake the story his dad told him about the biker who saved them once, the one who kept his word when no one else would. That's why the note, that's why the hope flickering in his chest like the diner's sign. As the sun crested the mesas, the ground trembled. A convoy rolled in, 300 Harleys thundering into the hollow, their pipes harmonizing in a symphony of steel. They didn't rev engines in rage or form lines for confrontation. Instead, they parked in orderly rows outside the chained community center, dismounting with quiet purpose. Jax led the way, the note now a banner in his hand, as families peeked from windows, eyes wide with disbelief. The riders carried tools, not weapons, hammers to break chains, voices to demand answers in the light of day. Word spread like wildfire through the town. Reporters arrived, cameras capturing the sea of vests emblazoned with iron promise. The developer's office doors stayed shut, but the pressure built, ethical and unyielding. Jack spotted a familiar face in the crowd, a woman from Zeke's old watch, her eyes meeting his with a nod that said everything. The boy's note had bridged the years, pulling them back to the promise. In that moment, under the rising sun, Eldridge Hollow felt alive again. The riders stood shoulder to shoulder, a wall of chosen family against the shadows of corruption. Daniel watched from afar, tears blurring the chrome reflections. They had come, the promise endured. If you're just tuning in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Stories like this need to reach every corner of the road. The sun climbed higher over Eldridge Hollow, painting the chained doors of the community center in golden hues that chased away the night's chill. Jax Harlan stood at the forefront of the assembled riders, his boots planted firm on the dusty lot, the folded note now tucked into his vest like a talisman. The air hummed with the settling echoes of engines cooling, a faint metallic tang mixing with the earthy scent of sagebrush stirred by the morning breeze. 300 strong, veterans with salt and pepper beards, young patches fresh from their first long hauls, women who'd earned their cuts through grit and grace, formed a living barrier, their shadows stretching long across the cracked pavement. No one spoke loudly. It was a vigil born of quiet conviction, the kind that Zeke Malone would have nodded at with that rare, approving grin. Families began to emerge from the side streets, hesitant at first, like deer sensing safety in the herd. A woman in her 50s, her face lined with the wear of too many unpaid bills, clutched a toddler's hand as she approached. You came," she whispered, her voice cracking like dry leather. Jax recognized her, Maria Ruiz, one of the original voices against the redevelopment scheme that had swallowed homes whole. 5 years ago, Zeke had stood right here, his Harley blocking a crew of surveyors until the sheriff backed off. Now, Maria's eyes searched Jax's, finding the echo of that promise. He nodded once, wordless, and stepped aside as the riders moved with purpose. Hammers rang out softly against the chains, not in fury, but in reclamation, the links clattering to the ground like forgotten shackles. Word of the gathering rippled through the hollow faster than a spark on dry tinder. By mid-morning, a cluster of locals had swelled the crowd, mill workers in faded flannel, elders who'd watched the neighborhood fade from vibrant to vacant. Daniel Frost watched from the motel's second-floor window, his breath fogging the glass. His mother, Elena, paced behind him, her fingers twisting the hem of her worn apron. "They can't just show up like this," she murmured, half in awe, half in fear. "The suits will come, they always do." Daniel pressed closer to the pane, spotting the black Harley that had carried the note's weight. The riders weren't tearing the place down. They were opening it up, hauling in crates of supplies from their saddlebags. Canned goods, blankets, even a generator, humming to life against the center's weathered wall. It was solidarity in motion, a promise woven into every gesture. Jax knelt by the entrance as the doors creaked open, revealing the dust-shrouded interior. Faded murals of local heroes on the walls, a stage where kids once performed holiday plays. Lena, the medic, directed a team to clear debris, her voice steady as she called out instructions. "Check the back rooms. Any families still squatting?" One rider, a burly vet named Thorne with a prosthetic arm gleaming in the light, nodded and vanished inside. Memories flooded Jax unbidden, Zeke's laugh echoing here during barbecues, the way he'd toss footballs to the neighborhood boys, teaching them that honor wasn't shouted but lived. The guilt twisted deeper now, sharper than before. He'd let the road pull him away after Zeke's fall, chasing horizons to outrun the ache. But the note had dragged him back, a boy's desperate script reminding him that promises didn't rust. They waited. As noon approached, the first ripple of opposition arrived not with sirens, but with polished sedans gliding to a halt at the lot's edge. Two men in crisp suits emerged, flanked by a pair of uniformed deputies, their badges catching the sun like warnings. The lead suit, Harlan Voss, known in town whispers as the redevelopment kingpin's right hand, adjusted his tie, his smile thin as razor wire. "This is private property," he announced, voice amplified by a portable speaker, though it carried no real authority in the face of the crowd. "Disperse, or we'll have to involve the law." The riders didn't flinch. They turned as one, a sea of vests facing the intruders with unblinking resolve. Jax rose slowly, the note in his outstretched hand, and read it aloud for all to hear. He kept his promise. "Please help us keep ours." Voss's composure cracked, just a flicker, recognition dawning. Zeke's stand had cost the project delays back then, bad press that nearly toppled the scheme. Now, with cameras from a local news van rolling nearby, the stakes climbed. "This is nostalgia, not justice," Voss sneered, but his eyes darted to the growing throng of families spilling stories to reporters. Evictions without cause, bribes disguised as relocation fees, officials turning blind eyes. One elder, Mr. Harlan, no relation to Jax, but a name that carried weight, stepped forward, his cane tapping the ground like a gavel. "Zeke Malone died protecting this place. These riders are his echo. You can't chain up a legacy." The deputies shifted uncomfortably, hands hovering near belts but finding no cause for action. Thorne emerged from the center then, carrying a stack of yellowed documents, old lease agreements unearthed from a forgotten filing cabinet, proof of the irregularities the families had reported and been silenced for. "Look at this," he said, passing them to a deputy whose face paled. The air thickened with tension, the scent of impending rain finally breaking through, droplets pattering on leather and metal alike. Jax met Voss's gaze, unflinching. "We're not here to fight. We're here to finish what Zeke started. Daylight's the best disinfectant." By afternoon, the standoff held, a fragile balance of wills. Reporters broadcast live, the story catching wind beyond the hollow, tweets and shares, amplifying the rider's quiet stand. Daniel slipped away from the motel, weaving through the edges of the crowd until he reached Jack's. The boy hesitated, then tugged at the rider's sleeve. Did it work? The note? Jax crouched, seeing the fear mirrored in Daniel's eyes, the same shadows that had haunted Zeke's last days. It's working, kid. Your dad, he's the one who told you about Zeke. Daniel nodded, voice small. He said promises like that don't die, but they took him, after we spoke up. Jax's jaw tightened, a vow forming unspoken. The iron promise wasn't just bikes and brotherhood. It was this, stepping into the breach for those who couldn't. As the sun dipped toward the mesas, casting long shadows over the reopened center, where families now gathered inside, sharing meals from rider-provided coolers. The weight of unity pressed against the corruption's facade. Voss retreated to his car, phone to his ear, but the damage was done. Accountability wasn't a storm. It was this steady dawn, eroding lies one honest hour at a time. Elena found Daniel amid the crowd, pulling him close as Lena approached with a blanket. "You're safe now," the medic said softly, her eyes on Jax. The riders formed a loose perimeter, engines idling like guardians, ready for whatever twilight brought. In the hollow's heart, the promise pulsed alive, binding strangers into family, honor into action. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments they reach you. The afternoon sun beat down on Eldridge Hollow like a relentless forge, turning the air thick and shimmering over the reopened community center. Jax Harlan wiped sweat from his brow, the salt stinging the faint scar above his eye, a memento from a long-ago skirmish that felt worlds away now. The riders had transformed the dusty lot into a makeshift haven. Folding tables groaned under pots of stew, simmered on portable stoves, the savory aroma of onions and herbs cutting through the metallic bite of cooling engines. Laughter bubbled from inside the center, where families rediscovered forgotten corners, kids chasing echoes on the creaky stage, elders sharing tales over lukewarm coffee. It was a fragile resurrection, stitched together by the iron promise's quiet labor, but Jax felt the undercurrent of tension coiling tighter, like a chain about to snap. He spotted Daniel lingering near the edge of the gathering, the boy's slender frame half hidden behind a stack of supply crates. Elena hovered nearby, her eyes scanning the crowd with a mother's vigilance, but she let him approach Jax alone. The rider knelt to meet the kid's gaze, the ground's heat seeping through his jeans. "Your dad's name, Frost, right? Tell me what happened after you left that note." Daniel's fingers twisted the hem of his shirt, the fabric threadbare from too many washes. "He worked the night shift at the mill. Last week, after we told the council about the fake leases, he didn't come home. Just gone. They said he quit, but his truck's still in the lot. I heard whispers, Voss's men making examples." The words hung heavy, laced with a fear that twisted Jax's gut. Zeke had faced similar shadows, vanishing into the night after one too many stands against the greed that choked the hollow. Jax rose, his hand briefly on Daniel's shoulder, a gesture of anchor in the storm. "We find him. No more whispers." He turned to Thorne, who was coordinating a perimeter check. The prosthetics were a soft counterpoint to the murmurs. "Round up a search team. Mill first, then the back roads." Thorne nodded, his face etched with the same quiet fire that had drawn him to the club after his own service scars. The iron promise wasn't built on spectacle. It thrived in these unseen threads, riders splitting off in pairs, engines purring low as they fanned out, eyes sharp for any sign of disturbance. Inside the center, Lena organized a makeshift aid station in what had been the old kitchen, her kit spread across a scarred counter. Bandages, water bottles, and notepads for jotting concerns, the tools of healing beyond flesh. Maria Ruiz sat across from her, cradling a mug, her toddler dozing in her lap. "Zeke pulled us through once," Maria said, voice steady but eyes distant. "Stood down a bulldozer crew single-handed, promised we'd never lose this place. Then he was gone, and so were we, scattered like dust." Lena's response was a nod, her own losses a silent companion. She'd lost her husband to the same road that claimed Zeke, but the club had become her chosen kin, binding wounds with loyalty stronger than blood. As more families filtered in, stories poured out. Eviction notices forged in haste, jobs yanked without cause, officials who'd once shaken hands now turning keys on empty homes. Each tale wove into the promise. A tapestry of betrayal that the riders absorbed without judgment, their presence alone a balm. Out on the lot, the standoff lingered like smoke after a fire. Voss's sedans idled at a distance, the suits huddled in conference, phones pressed to ears as if summoning reinforcements from the ether. A deputy broke away, approaching Jax with measured steps, his uniform crisp but his posture uncertain. "Captain says to tell you this is escalating. Permits were pulled legally, redevelopments for the town's good." Jax met his gaze unflinching, the sun glinting off his vest's patches. "Good for who? The families who built this hollow, or the ones pocketing the dirt?" The deputy faltered, glancing at the documents Thorne had unearthed. Pages yellowed but damning, signatures mismatched, dates that didn't align with any record of fair process. "We'll look into it," he muttered, retreating as a news crew edged closer, microphones thrusting like probes. The air shifted then, a low rumble building from the east, not thunder, but the growl of approaching bikes. Reinforcements from outlying chapters, 24 more riders pulling in with saddlebags laden with tools and tents. They dismounted seamlessly, integrating into the line as if choreographed, their arrival swelling the crowd to near 400 souls. Rook, the young patch, handed Jax a satellite radio crackling with updates. "Scouts at the mill, trucks there, but tampered. Signs of a scuffle, nothing more." Jax's jaw clenched, the note's words echoing in his mind. He kept his promise. The boy's plea wasn't just for the center, it was for a father lost to the same machine that had claimed Zeke. Guilt flared anew. How many promises had he let fade on the horizon, chasing freedom over duty? But here, under the relentless sky, redemption stirred, a slow burn in his chest. As dusk crept in, painting the mesas in bruised purples, the search teams returned empty-handed from the mill. Frustration etched on their faces. Daniel's hope flickered, but Jax gathered the core group around the fire pit they'd ignited in the lot, flames dancing like captured stars, casting warm glows on weathered leather. "We don't stop," he said, voice carrying over the crackle. "Zeke taught us that. We dig deeper. Records, witnesses, whatever it takes. This hollow's ours to hold." Nods rippled through the circle, a pact renewed in the fading light. Elena joined them then, Daniel at her side, her hand finding Jax's in a moment of shared resolve. "Thank you," she whispered, the words heavy with the weight of survival. Night fell fully, stars pricking the velvet sky as lanterns flickered to life around the center. Riders stood watch in shifts, their silhouettes guardians against the encroaching dark. Voss's cars finally peeled away, taillights vanishing into the gloom, but the victory felt tentative, a breath held against the wind. Inside, the community stirred with tentative life. A guitar strummed softly, voices joining in an old hollow tune about roads untaken and oaths unbroken. Jax leaned against his Harley, the engine's residual warmth a comfort, watching Daniel laugh for the first time that day amid a group of kids. The promise pulsed on, a heartbeat in the quiet, binding the fractured into whole. But shadows lingered, whispers of deeper corruption waiting to uncoil, testing the iron promise's unyielding core. Dawn would bring new resolve, but for now, the night held them in its vigilant embrace. The stars wheeled overhead in Eldridge Hollow's ink-black sky, a silent jury to the vigil below. Jack's Harlan shifted against the cool flank of his Harley, the metal still radiating faint warmth from the day's exertions, as if the machine itself refused to let go of the fire. Lanterns cast pooling glows across the community center's lot, where riders moved like shadows in a well-rehearsed dance, some tending the fire pit, others murmuring updates into radios that crackled with static. The air carried the smoky bite of burning mesquite, mingling with the distant hoot of an owl, a reminder that the desert never truly slept. Inside the center, the guitar's strings hummed a low melody, voices weaving in softly, a fragile thread holding the night together. But Jax's thoughts churned, anchored to Daniel's words. A father vanished, echoes of Zeke's own end in the machine's grip. He pushed off the bike, boots scraping the gravel as he made his way toward the aid station. Lena looked up from her station, her face illuminated by a hanging bulb, lines of fatigue etching deeper around her eyes. "Search teams are out again," she said without preamble, folding a bandage with precise hands. "Thorns leading the back roads, any old sheds or lots where they might stash trouble." Jax nodded, the weight of command settling heavier now, like saddlebags overloaded for a long haul. The Iron Promise had faced down bar fights and border runs, but this was different, a quiet war against the erosion of trust, where the enemy wore suits and smiled for cameras. "And the documents? Anything solid?" Lena slid a folder across the counter, pages crisp under his fingers. Enough to raise questions. Mismatched signatures, approvals rubber-stamped by council ghosts. If we get this to the right ears, it could crack the whole thing open. Across the lot, Daniel sat cross-legged by the fire, poking at embers with a stick, his mother's blanket draped over his shoulders like a shield. Eleanor had joined a circle of women sharing stories, their voices a low cadence of resilience. Tales of homes bartered away for promises that evaporated like morning dew. The boy looked up as Jax approached, his eyes reflecting the flames dance. "You think they'll find him? Dad always said the riders were like ghosts, show up when you need them most." Jax lowered himself beside him, the ground's chill seeping through his jeans, a stark contrast to the warmth in the kid's tentative hope. "Ghosts keep promises, Daniel. Zeke was one. We're just the echo." He pulled the note from his vest, unfolding it in the firelight, the shaky script glowing like a cipher. It's louder than any engine roar. It called us because it had to. Now we answer." The night deepened, the first hints of false dawn brushing the eastern horizon with slate grey. A low rumble stirred the quiet. Not the search bikes, but something heavier, deliberate. Headlights pierced the gloom from the main road. 3 black SUVs rolling in like predators scenting blood. They halted at the lot's perimeter, doors opening to disgorge a half-dozen figures. Voss at the lead, his suit rumpled now, flanked by more deputies and a man Jax didn't recognize. Tall, silver-haired, exuding the polished menace of boardroom authority. The developer himself, perhaps, the shadow behind the scheme. The group advanced, flashlights cutting arcs through the dark, but the riders met them without rising, a wall of leather and resolve. Voss's voice sliced the air, amplified by tension rather than tech. "This charade ends now. You've trespassed long enough. Clear out, or we'll clear you." Jack stood slowly, the fire's embers popping behind him like punctuation. He held up the documents, the pages catching the SUV's beams. "Trespass. This is homecoming. These papers say the evictions were built on sand, faked trails to bury the truth." The silver-haired man stepped forward, his eyes narrowing on the folder, a flicker of calculation crossing his features. "Truth is flexible in progress. This town's dying. We're breathing life into it. Jobs, homes, Better than this relic. Murmurs rippled through the riders, but no one moved. Maria Ruiz emerged from the center, her toddler asleep on her hip, voice steady as desert stone. Progress that leaves us in the dust. Zeke stopped you once. These folks are his word made real. The standoff thickened, the air electric with unspoken stakes. A deputy shifted, his light catching Thorne's return, the vet dismounting with purposeful strides, a canvas bag slung over his shoulder. Found something at the mill's edge, he announced, loud enough for the intruders to hear. He unzipped the bag, revealing a worn jacket, monogrammed with frost in faded thread, and a set of keys that glinted accusingly. No blood, no signs of struggle, just absence, the kind that spoke volumes in its silence. Daniel bolted forward, snatching the jacket, burying his face in the fabric as Elena rushed to his side, her gasp a knife in the quiet. "That's his," she whispered, fingers tracing the seams. Voss's face paled, the silver-haired man whispering urgently at his elbow. Jax faced them, the note now joined by the jacket in his grip, a boy's plea and a father's trace, symbols heavier than iron. This isn't about land anymore. It's about a man gone because he spoke up. You want progress? Start with honesty. The developer's gaze darted to the growing cluster of locals, phones out now, recording every word under the lantern's glow. Reporters had trickled back, their van's lights joining the fray, broadcasting the confrontation live into the ether. The deputies exchanged glances, one muttering into his radio, the line of authority fraying like old rope. "We'll investigate," the silver-haired man conceded finally, his tone clipped, retreating to the SUVs with Voss in tow. Engines growled to life, taillights fading into the pre-dawn murk, leaving the lot in charged silence. As the first true light crested the mesas, painting the center in rosy hues, the riders exhaled collectively. Thorne clapped Jax on the back, the prosthetics click a note of solidarity. "That jacket's a lead. We'll trace it. Cameras, witnesses." Inside, the guitar picked up again, the melody swelling with tentative triumph. Daniel clutched the jacket to his chest, Elena's arm around him, as families gathered closer, sharing the warmth of reclaimed space. Jax watched the horizon, the desert wind stirring dust devils that danced like freed spirits. The promise had drawn bloodless lines in the sand, forcing the shadows to retreat. But the hunt for Frost burned brighter now, a moral compass guiding the Brotherhood forward. Lena approached with coffee, steam rising like prayers. Zeke would be proud. This is how we honor him, not with fists, but with standing firm. Jax sipped, the bitterness grounding him, as Rook radioed in from a scout run. Faint tire tracks leading toward the old quarry. A place whispers tied to Voss's operations. The Iron Promise mobilized subtly, bikes firing up in low purrs, heading out to follow the trail without fanfare. In the center's heart, a young girl from Maria's family strummed a new chord, voices joining in a song of hollow roots and unbreakable bonds. Dawn broke fully, the sun gilding chrome and faces alike, illuminating a community knitting itself anew. But Jax knew the night had only paused the storm. Deeper roots of corruption waited to be unearthed, testing the limits of loyalty and the enduring power of a single kept word. If this chapter's resolve has you fired up, hit that like button. It fuels stories of honor like this one. The first rays of dawn sliced through the desert haze, turning the old quarry's jagged edges into a labyrinth of rust-red shadows. Jax Harlan led the vanguard of 10 riders, their Harleys navigating the rutted access road with muffled growls, dust clouds trailing like ghosts in their wake. The air was crisp, laced with the sharp tang of minerals and damp earth from an overnight sprinkle that had softened the ground just enough to preserve tracks. Thorne rode shotgun beside him, the vet's prosthetic arm steady on the throttle, his eyes scanning the terrain like a hawk on patrol. Behind them, Rook and a few others fanned out, engines idling low to avoid alerting any unseen watchers. The jacket in Jax's saddlebag felt like an accusation, its fabric carrying the faint scent of mill oil and sweat, a father's echo urging them onward. They'd pieced it together from the tracks, wide treads matching heavy-duty rigs, veering off the main highway toward this forgotten scar on the landscape. The quarry had been abandoned for years, its pits a graveyard for rusted machinery and shattered dreams of boom times long past. Whispers in the hollow tied it to Voss's operations, off-book storage for sensitive dealings, away from prying eyes. Jax's mind replayed Daniel's face by the fire, the boy's trust a fragile flame he wouldn't let gutter out. Zeke had taught him that promises weren't chains. They were lifelines, pulled taut in the dark to haul the lost back to light. The convoy crested a rise, the quarry unfolding below like a wound in the earth. Piles of aggregate loomed like ancient sentinels, interspersed with chain-link fencing sagging under neglect. No guards patrolled the perimeter, but a lone security light flickered atop a prefab trailer, casting erratic beams across a cluster of parked vehicles. 2 box trucks and a sedan that screamed official indifference. Jax signaled a halt, the bike settling into silence, broken only by the tick of cooling metal. "Eyes sharp," he murmured into the radio, dismounting with fluid grace honed from decades on the road. Thorne joined him, the pair advancing on foot through the scrub, boots silent on the gravelly soil. A faint metallic clink echoed from the trailer's direction, chains rattling perhaps, or a door easing shut. Jax's pulse quickened, the desert wind whispering warnings through the mesquite. They crested a berm, dropping low behind a stack of weathered pallets, and peered out. The trailer door stood ajar, spilling dim yellow light onto the ground. Inside, shadows moved, 2 figures in coveralls, their voices a low mutter about delays and cleaning up loose ends. Jax's grip tightened on his handlebar tape, but he held back. This wasn't a raid. It was revelation. Justice served in the open air of truth. Thorne nudged him, pointing to a side lot where a chain-link gate hung loose. Beyond it, in the quarry's shallow pit, sat a familiar pickup, the one Elena had described, Frost's work truck, its hood popped and engine exposed like a gutted beast. No one guarded it, but fresh oil stains marred the dirt and a toolbox lay overturned nearby, tools scattered as if in haste. Jax crept closer, heart pounding a steady rhythm against his ribs, the cool morning air raising gooseflesh under his vest. He knelt by the truck, fingers tracing the dash where a family photo, Daniel grinning beside a broad-shouldered man, had been wedged. It was gone now, but the imprint lingered, a ghost of normalcy. A soft groan cut the silence, emanating from the truck's bed, covered by a tarp that billowed slightly in the breeze. Jax signaled Thorne, who flanked the other side. They lifted the edge in unison, revealing Daniel's father, Tom Frost, huddled there, wrists bound with zip ties, his face bruised but eyes alert, with guarded relief. No severe wounds marred him, just the wear of confinement, rumpled clothes, a split lip suggesting restraint rather than rage. "Easy," Jax whispered, slicing the ties with a multi-tool from his pocket. Tom coughed, the sound ragged, drawing in the free air like a man surfacing from depths. The kid. "Daniel, he okay?" "He's the one who brought us here," Jax replied, helping him sit up, the tarp rustling like shed skin. Thorne scanned the horizon, radioing the all-clear. Tom's story spilled out in hushed tones as they eased him toward the bikes, grabbed after his shift, roughed up lightly to discourage questions, stashed here to cool off while Voss's crew tied up loose ends on the leases. No grand conspiracy confessed, but the fear in his voice painted it clear, intimidation's cold calculus, meant to silence without spectacle. "I told Daniel about Zeke years back. Said if things got bad, find the riders. Guess he listened." Back at the community center, the rising sun bathed the lot in warm amber, the earlier vigil evolving into purposeful bustle. Riders who'd stayed behind had fortified the haven, barriers of sawhorses around the perimeter, a central table laden with maps and the unearthed documents, now joined by Tom's testimony, scrawled on fresh paper in his steady hand. Families clustered in the center's main hall, the air humming with low conversations and the clatter of plates from a communal breakfast. Pancakes sizzling on griddles, coffee brewing strong to chase the night's chill. Eleanor spotted the returning convoy first, her hand flying to her mouth as Tom dismounted Jax's bike, legs unsteady but stride determined. Daniel broke from the crowd, barreling into his father's arms, the reunion a quiet storm of hugs and muffled sobs that rippled through the gathering like a healing wave. Jax watched from the sidelines, leaning against his Harley, as Lena checked Tom over, her kit open on a nearby bench. The medic's nod was all the assurance needed, no lasting harm, just echoes to fade with time. Maria approached, her toddler trailing behind, eyes shining with a gratitude that needed no words. Zeke's promise. It's alive in you all. Jax inclined his head, the weight lifting slightly from his shoulders, though the scar of his own lapses remained, a reminder that redemption was a road, not a destination. Word of the rescue spread swiftly, locals murmuring in clusters, phones buzzing with shares that carried the story beyond the hollow. Voss's operation cracked further under the light. By mid-morning, a state investigator arrived unannounced, drawn by the live feeds and the mounting pressure of public eyes. The silver-haired developer hadn't shown his face again, but his sedan was spotted fleeing town limits, tail between legs. The deputies, once hesitant, now facilitated, escorting Tom to give a formal statement, the documents forming a bulwark against the facade of legality. As the day wore on, the Iron Promise riders began to disperse in waves, engines firing up with satisfied rumbles, but not before a circle formed around the fire pit, now cold ashes in the sunlight. Jax stood at its center, the note and jacket passed hand to hand like relics. "This hollow stands because we remembered," he said, voice gravelly but clear, carrying over the lot. "Zeke's word, Tom's fight, Daniel's courage, it's the chain we choose, not the one they try to forge." Nods echoed, fists bumping in silent pacts, the brotherhood's bond tightening like well-oiled gears. Daniel lingered near Jax as the group broke, the boy's eyes brighter now, unshadowed. "You kept it, all of it." Jax ruffled his hair, a rare softness cracking his facade. "We all did, kid. Promises like that, they ride with us." The desert wind picked up, stirring dust into playful eddies, as families reclaimed spaces inside the center. Kids sketching on the walls, elders planning community watches. Thorne clapped Jax on the back, the two mounting up for the road ahead, but the hollow felt changed, honor etched into its bones, a testament to the quiet power of standing firm. Yet as the sun arced toward noon, a new whisper reached Jax's ear from a scout's radio. Traces of Voss's crew scattering documents at the quarry, hints of wider networks reaching into city halls far beyond the mesas. The promise endured, but its guardians knew the road twisted on, loyalty's test eternal, pulling them into horizons yet unseen. The noon sun hung high over Eldridge Hollow, its glare turning the community center's lot into a shimmering sea of chrome and dust. Jax Harlan stood at the edge of the gathering, the scout's radio still warm in his hand, its last crackle fading like a distant echo. The air thrummed with the low buzz of conversation, families inside the center sharing plates of fresh-baked cornbread, the buttery scent wafting out on waves of relieved laughter. Tom's rescue had breathed life into the place, but the whisper of scattered documents gnawed at Jax, a loose thread in the tapestry of promises they were weaving. He glanced at Daniel, now helping his father stack chairs in the hall, their movements synced in a rhythm of quiet homecoming. Elena watched them with eyes softened by tears held back, her hand brushing Jax's arm in passing, a silent thanks that carried more weight than words. Thorne approached, his boots kicking up faint puffs of earth, the prosthetic arm glinting as he holstered the radio. Quarries clear now, but those papers they ditched? Rooks bagging them. Ledgers, emails printed hasty, names from upstate councils. Voss wasn't the head, he's just the local snake. Jax nodded, the desert heat pressing against his vest like an insistent reminder. The iron promise had pulled Tom from the shadows, but this trail led deeper into the veins of corruption that fed on towns like this one. Zeke's vow had always been bigger than one stand. It was a shield for the forgotten, and now it demanded they extend it further. "We follow it," Jax said, voice low and steady. "No charging in blind. Get Lena and a few trusted to sift through. Quiet rides to the contacts mentioned. See what echoes back." By early afternoon, the center pulsed with renewed purpose. Riders formed small teams, engines purring to life in staggered departures, their paths diverging toward dusty backroads and forgotten diners where old allies might hold keys. Jax mounted his Harley, the leather seat creaking under him, and led a trio toward the state line. A lead on a councillor named Hale, whose signature looped through the ledgers like a signature of guilt. The road unspooled before them, asphalt rippling in the heat haze, the wind whipping Jax's face with the sharp bite of sage and sun-baked stone. Memories surfaced unbidden, Zeke riding shotgun on a similar run years back, his voice gravel over the roar. "Honor ain't about the win, brother. It's about the stand that outlasts you." Jax throttled harder, the vibration rumbling through his bones, chasing that echo to make it real. Miles blurred into a montage of parched landscapes, mesas rising like silent witnesses, hawks wheeling overhead on thermal currents. They pulled into a roadside stop near the border, a weathered gas station with pumps that wheezed fuel like tired breaths. The attendant, a grizzled vet with Iron Promise ink peeking from his sleeve, recognized Jax's cut immediately. "Heard about the Hollow. Good on you for Frost." Over lukewarm sodas at a splintered picnic table, the man shared fragments. Hale's office in a mid-sized town called Ridgeport, a place where redevelopment deals flowed like bad coffee, greased by hands that never washed clean. He owes favors to the Silver Fox, your developer. But there's a clerk there, Elena's cousin maybe. She's been whispering doubts, collecting her own proof. The lead burned brighter as they pressed on, arriving at Ridgeport as shadows lengthened, the town's main drag lined with faded storefronts and official buildings that loomed like judgmental sentinels. Jax parked the bikes in a discreet alley, the engine's hush a tactical pause. They moved on foot, leather soles soft against the sidewalk, the evening air cooling to carry hints of river mud from a nearby bend. The council building stood squat and unassuming, its windows dark save for a single light in an upper office. Thorne scaled a fire escape with surprising agility, prosthetic gripping the rungs like an extension of will, while Jax and Rook kept watch below, hearts sinking to the distant hum of traffic. Inside, the clerk, a woman named Sophia, her face etched with the quiet defiance of someone who'd seen too much, met them in a back stairwell, her hands trembling as she passed a thumb drive. Hale's in deep, the Hollows project, just one thread in a web, kicking out families for luxury builds, pocketing grants meant for real help. Voss reports to him, and higher. Her voice cracked, eyes darting to the door. "I lost my home to it last year, for Tom's sake and that boy's note. Take it. Make it count." Jax pocketed the drive, the plastic cool against his palm, a digital promise heavier than the paper one that started it all. No dramatic escape followed. They slipped away under the cover of twilight, the building's shadow swallowing their retreat like a conspirator. Back in Eldridge Hollow by midnight, the center's lanterns burned steady, a beacon against the star-pricked sky. Jax gathered the core circle around the fire pit, now rekindled with fresh logs that snapped and popped, sending sparks spiraling upward. Tom sat nearby, bandaged but upright, Daniel at his side, absorbing the weight of the unfolding truth. Lena plugged the drive into a rugged laptop, the screen's glow illuminating faces etched with resolve. Files unfolded, emails chaining Voss to Hale, falsified reports siphoning funds, a network of displacements stretching across 3 counties. "This blows it wide," Lena murmured, her medic's precision turning to strategist. Maria nodded from the circle's edge, her toddler asleep in a sling, the group's chosen family expanding in the firelight. But the night held a sharper edge. As the group pored over the data, a lone engine growled from the road, not a rider's, but a sleek cruiser pulling up uninvited. The silver-haired developer dismounted, alone this time, his suit disheveled, eyes hollowed by the chase. He approached the fire's perimeter, hands raised in a gesture of parley, the flames reflecting in his gaze like flickering doubts. "I know what you found," he said, voice stripped of earlier polish. "Hale's the linchpin, but ending him drags us all down. Jobs gone, the whole region's economy." Jax rose, the note and drive in hand, the air between them thick with the smoke's acrid veil. "Your progress built on broken backs. Zeke died calling that out. We're not ending anything, we're starting right." The man hesitated, the weight of exposure cracking his facade, a confession spilling in fragments, years of climbing ladders slick with others' falls, the hollow just collateral in a bigger game. No violence erupted, instead a tense accord formed. The developer agreeing to testify, flipping the script under the promise of leniency for the small fish. Riders flanked him warily as he retreated, the cruiser's taillights vanishing into the dark. Leaving the circle to exhale, Thorne clapped Jax's shoulder, the sound a solid anchor. "That's Zeke's way. Truth over thunder." Dawn approached as the group dispersed, the fire dying to embers that mirrored the quiet victories. Daniel approached Jax last, the boy's voice steady. "Dad says you're family now, like Zeke was." Jax knelt, the first light touching his scars, a nod sealing the bond. Inside the center, families stirred, the air alive with plans for a true reclamation. Community votes, legal watches, roots digging deeper. But Jax felt the road's pull, the wider web demanding more rides, more stands. The promise, once a boy's note, now thrummed like an engine's heart, carrying the iron promise into uncharted dawns, where loyalty forged paths through the unyielding dust. The morning light filtered through the community center's newly unboarded windows, casting elongated patterns across the scarred wooden floors, like veins of gold in weathered stone. Jax Harlan stood on the porch, the faint scent of cooling embers from the fire pit clinging to his vest, mingling with the fresh aroma of dew-kissed sage rolling in from the mesas. The silver-haired developer's cruiser had long vanished into the pre-dawn haze, his fragmented confession echoing in Jax's mind, a crack in the edifice of greed that had loomed over Eldridge Hollow for too long. The thumb drive's contents, now backed up and shared with the state investigator who'd arrived at first light, painted a damning portrait. Hale's web of falsified grants and coerced silences, threading through council halls like hidden roots. But justice here wasn't a gavel's slam. It was the steady grind of truth, born on the wings of unity. Inside, the hall buzzed with a rhythm reborn. Tom Frost sat at a makeshift table, his split lip bandaged but voice firm as he recounted details to a pair of plainclothes agents, their notebooks filling with the precision of reluctant accountability. Daniel hovered nearby, fetching water with a steadiness that belied his years, his eyes flicking to Jax now and then, a silent tether forged in the night's revelations. Elena moved among the families, organizing stacks of legal aid forms procured from a pro bono network Lena had tapped. Her apron swapped for a clipboard that made her seem like the Hollow's quiet general. "This place is ours again," she said to Maria, who nodded while bouncing her toddler on her knee, the child's laughter a counterpoint to the low murmur of plans unfolding. Jack stepped inside, the floorboards creaking under his boots like an old friend's greeting. Thorne and Rook flanked him, the vet's prosthetic whirring softly as he unrolled a map on the table, marking routes to Ridgeport and beyond. "Hale's holed up," Thorne reported, his finger tracing a line to the council building. "Sophia's Clark friend says he's scrambling, lawyers circling, but the drive's got him pinned. We ride in with the investigator, hand it off clean. No shadows this time." Jax's gaze lingered on the faded mural of local heroes, Zeke's imagined face among them, stern and unyielding. The guilt that had ridden Shotgun for years now felt lighter, transmuted into purpose. A redemption not in isolation but shared, the Iron Promises creed made flesh. By midday a convoy formed outside, 20 riders strong, engines idling in a harmonious low growl that vibrated through the lot, stirring dust into swirling veils. Families lined the porch, hands raised in waves that carried gratitude like a breeze. Tom clasped Jax's forearm, the grip ironclad. "You brought me back, and more. Hope I thought was rusted through." Daniel stepped forward, pressing a small, hand-drawn emblem into Jax's palm, an iron fist clutching a chain, etched with shaky lines. "For the road," the boy said, voice steady. Jax pocketed it beside the original note, the paper's edges softened by handling, a bridge between past and promise. The ride to Ridgeport unfolded under a vast, unclouded sky, the asphalt humming beneath tires as mesas gave way to rolling scrubland. Jax led, wind tearing at his face with the clean bite of velocity, the desert's vastness mirroring the expanse of what they'd reclaimed. Thorne rode parallel, radio linking them to the investigator's unmarked car trailing behind, a symbol of institutional gears finally turning in alignment. No dramatic pursuit marred the journey. Instead, arrival brought a measured siege. Bikes parking in orderly ranks before the council hall, vests gleaming under the sun as locals and press gathered, drawn by the ripple of news feeds. Hale's office yielded without resistance. The councillor, a wiry man with spectacles perched like defences, emerged flanked by attorneys, his face ashen as the investigator presented the drive. "This is a misunderstanding," Hale stammered. But the files spoke louder, emails time-stamped, accounts traced, the Hollow's evictions exposed as the tip of a syndicate siphoning public funds for private empires. Jax stood at the periphery, arms crossed, the weight of 300 riders resolve a silent pressure in the room. No fists flew. Hale's confession came in the fluorescent glare, a cascade of names and deals tumbling out like stones from an avalanche. Arrests followed swiftly, Voss in custody by evening, the silver-haired developer turning state's evidence in a plea for leniency. The web unraveled, thread by thread, not in violence, but in the inexorable light of exposure. Back in Eldridge Hollow, as twilight deepened, the centre glowed like a hearth against the encroaching dusk. Riders dismounted to cheers, the lot alive with shared meals, grills firing up with the sizzle of burgers and the smoky tang of charred peppers. Lena tended minor scrapes from the day's rides, her laughter mingling with the crowds as Thorne regaled kids with tales of desert runs, prosthetic arm waving like a storyteller's prop. Jax found Daniel by the fire pit, now ringed with stones, flames leaping to illuminate faces etched with hard-won peace. "It's over?" the boy asked, poking at the logs. Jack shook his head, a faint smile cracking his jaw. "Ends like this one? Nah. But we've kept Zeke's word. Yours too. That's the legacy. Family chosen, standing tall." Tom joined them, Eleanor at his side. The four forming a quiet circle as stars emerged overhead, pinpricks of constancy. The hollow breathed easier now. Eviction notices voided, funds redirected to rebuild. The community center's doors flung wide for meetings and memories. Maria strummed her guitar inside, voices swelling in a hymn to roots unbroken, the melody drifting out like an invitation. Jax felt the road's pull once more, but not as escape, as extension. The iron promises engines ready for the next horizon, where promises waited to be honored. As the fire died to embers, Jax raised a toast with a tin mug of coffee, the group falling silent. To Zeke, to Frost, to the chains we break together. Murmurs of agreement rippled, bonds sealed in the night's embrace. The desert wind whispered approval, carrying the scent of sage and steel into the dark, where honor's echo lingered long after the last bike's rumble faded. Thank you for riding this journey with us. Stories of unbreakable promises deserve to echo far. If this tale of loyalty and redemption moved you, hit that subscribe button and join the Iron Promise family. Turn on notifications. The road ahead has more horizons to conquer.